The Titanic is sitting at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean right now. We know exactly where it is. We've sent cameras down, we've sent submarines, we've even sent tourists. So why hasn't anyone just brought it back up? It seems like the obvious move, right? You've got the most famous ship in history sitting on the ocean floor. Turn it into a museum. Charge admission, you'd make a fortune. And people have tried. Over the past century, engineers, billionaires, and salvage companies have proposed dozens of plans to raise the Titanic. Some were creative, some were completely insane, and every single one of them failed. And here's why. The Titanic rests about 12,500 feet below the surface of the North Atlantic. That's roughly 2.5 miles straight down. To put that in perspective, if you stacked the Empire State Building on top of itself more than 8 times, it still wouldn't reach the wreck from the surface. At that depth, the water pressure is around 6,000 pounds per square inch. That's about 400 times the pressure you feel standing on the beach right now. Your lungs would be crushed instantly. A normal submarine hull would crumple like a soda can. And in June of 2023, the world saw exactly what that pressure can do. The Titan submersible, carrying 5 people down to visit the Titanic, suffered a catastrophic implosion. The carbon fiber hull collapsed in a fraction of a second. Everyone on board was killed instantly. The force was so extreme that the entire vessel was reduced to fragments scattered across the ocean floor. That's what 6,000 pounds per square inch does to a purpose-built deep-sea submersible. Now imagine trying to attach cables, rig lifting equipment, and raise an entire ship in those conditions, in complete darkness, in near-freezing water, 2.5 miles below the nearest breath of air. But let's say you solve the pressure problem. Let's say you build equipment that can handle it and operate at the bottom of the ocean. You've still got another problem, and that is weight. The Titanic displaces over 52,000 tons. That's the weight of roughly 36,000 cars. No crane on Earth can lift that. No cable system ever built could handle that kind of load from that depth. The tensile strength required doesn't exist in any material we currently manufacture at that scale. And even if you could somehow generate enough upward force, the ship itself would fall apart the moment you tried. Because here's the thing most people don't realize. The Titanic isn't sitting down there in one piece. It broke in half as it sank. The bow and the stern are separated by about 2,000 feet of open ocean floor. The bow section looks surprisingly intact in photographs, but the stern is barely recognizable. It's a twisted, compressed pile of steel that doesn't even look like part of a ship anymore. And even the bow, which appears solid from the outside, is incredibly fragile. The steel has been weakened by over a century of corrosion. Entire sections of railing have already collapsed. The decks are buckling inward. If you attached cables to the hull and started pulling, the ship wouldn't rise. It would disintegrate, so you can't lift it as one piece. But that hasn't stopped people from coming up with some truly wild ideas. One of the most famous proposals suggested filling the wreck with ping pong balls, millions and millions of them. The theory was that all those tiny air-filled balls would create enough buoyancy to float the ship to the surface. It's actually a clever idea on paper, but here's the problem. At 6,000 pounds per square inch, every single ping pong ball would be crushed flat the instant it reached the wreck. Completely useless. Another plan proposed injecting the hull with petroleum jelly to displace the water and create buoyancy. Someone else suggested encasing the entire ship in a giant block of ice, which would theoretically float it to the surface. Engineers at the BOC group actually calculated what that would require. The answer was 500,000 tons of liquid nitrogen pumped down to the seafloor, which is, to put it mildly, not practical. And then there was the idea from Clive Cussler's 1976 novel, Raise the Titanic. In the book, the hero patches the holes in the hull, fills the ship with compressed air, and the Titanic rockets to the surface like a submarine blowing its ballast tanks. Great scene. Made for a dramatic movie poster. But it was written when people still believed the Titanic sank in one piece. It didn't. And even if it had, compressed air at that depth would require pressures no hull could contain. None of these ideas would work, not even close. But someone did manage to bring part of the Titanic to the surface. And the story of how it happened is almost as dramatic as the sinking itself.